This video is sponsored by Squarespace, the all-in-one platform to build a beautiful online presence. Being a cinematographer is a collaborative process. They need to work with technical crew, the director, and even indirectly with the screenwriter due to how they visually interpret the script. Linus Sandgren is a DP who focuses on these collaborations, especially the director, to find a mutually agreed upon look for each movie that takes the tonal and thematic aspects of the screenplay into account. In this episode, I'll dive into his philosophical approach to shooting movies, and then take a look at some examples of the gear he uses to execute his photography. Creating images in a crafted way isn't just a matter of arriving at the location, pointing a fancy camera at the action, and hoping for the best. Some of the most important and influential work that cinematographers do actually happens before then. In initial meetings before shooting, they will be presented with a script or with a concept for the shoot. In order to execute the shoot, they first need to come up with ideas for a look or visual style for the film. There are two facets to this: uncovering the tone and themes present in the screenplay and incorporating the tone that the director envisions for the movie.
You need to have a great relationship with the director, and I think normally I try to figure out how the director works and what he likes, and I like to try to adapt to that director's style of working. I mean, my experience with directors is that they also need us have a partner to communicate and collaborate with to create the visual storytelling.
This doesn't mean that Sandgren sees directors as having fixed styles. More often than not, the tone and feeling that needs to be communicated visually will be determined by the content of the story.
It was sort of a 180 from La La Land to do First Man. His style of doing La La Land was, very much like a whimsical musical, right? So in First Man, he wanted it to be very realistic and emotionally immersive.
Just looking at the way the camera moves differently in these two films communicates two different feelings. One is smooth, theatrical, coordinated, and flowing, while the other is rougher, more intimate, and realistic. But we'll get more into how he practically executed those tones later on. So, while the director's style of working may influence the visual approach, so does the screenplay. In pre-production, Sandgren therefore asks himself two questions. 1. How do you take a script and come up with a tone or themes that are pertinent to the story? 2. How do you then take those concepts and apply them practically to create the images? On No Time to Die, he chatted with director Cary Fukunaga during prep to come up with these answers.
Another thing that Cary then discussed with me a lot was the sort of expectations that we have on a Bond film is that it should be entertaining, it should be sort of a joyride for the audience, that we can go through a film and feel like it's one long big adventure, right? Then we start to discuss sort of themes and keywords, which to me is really important as a cinematographer. And I feel like I always start with the most simple words between me and the director. Like, for example, could be loss, right? Or grief, or death, or things that matters for the story.
With these keywords decided upon, he can put down emotional tones or themes on a screenplay or story timeline, and then break down how he can achieve this effect in each scene visually. For example, for the emotionally jarring opening scene, it was important that the images were not beautiful postcard landscape snow images, but rather that they felt a bit more ominous, eerie, dangerous, and isolated, by making the images more of a monochromatic blue rather than crisp whites and a beautiful sunny blue sky with a warm backlight. This is a good example of how cinematography and a look can be used to subtly influence the emotional impact of a story. He is also deliberate about how he hires crew. In the same way that the gear will impose its own visual feeling on a film, so too does the crew that you hire. Every person will set up a shot differently, come up with their own technical opinions, creative suggestions, and style of physically operating the camera.
Sometimes I love to operate, so I put an operator off, to not work on a film, because I like to operate. Like on First Man, I actually operated a camera, and while on La La Land, I had operators, because it depends on how I want to tell the story and when I feel it's important for me to be closer to the actual making of the image. And sometimes it's better to have someone else do it.
First Man used a lot of handheld work and immersive operation of the camera. Sometimes with handheld operation, it's easier to find the right movement to tell personal stories when the camera is on your own shoulder. Before I get to some of the gear that Sandgren has used to achieve different looks in the films he shoots, I'd like to take a moment to thank the sponsor of this video, Squarespace. Squarespace is an all-in-one platform that can be used to easily create a stylish and functional website, which is why I use Squarespace to make the In-Depth Cine website by choosing from their range of professional portfolio template designs. Each week I use their blogging tools, which allows me to categorize, schedule, and integrate my YouTube videos along with a written article on their site, so that I can stay organized and on top of uploading new content for you guys. Squarespace makes it easy for cinematographers and filmmakers to build their own website where they can display their work by using Squarespace's video libraries and maintain an online presence to attract new collaborators or clients. Head to squarespace.com for a free trial, and when you're ready to launch, go to squarespace.com/indepthcine to save 10% of your first purchase of a website or domain. With an understanding of the kind of tone and feeling that he needs to impart in the images, he can now go about choosing the correct gear to execute that tone. One aspect of this is choosing the camera and lenses for a project. For example, on Don't Look Up, he pitched the idea that the script should be rooted as a political thriller, and that the comedy should come from the script and actors, rather than shooting it as a brighter comedy. So to ratchet up the tension of the thriller, he used camera movement, mainly working off a dolly, and also a stylistic trademark of the director Adam McKay, zooms.
When things sort of hit the fan and got even more suspenseful in dialogue scenes, we could dolly to create tension with the dolly moves. But also we went a lot to longer zooms, for practical reasons we actually didn't go to anamorphic zooms, so we went for spherical zooms.
Due to the extra glass needed in anamorphic lenses, they usually let in less light, while spherical zooms have a faster stop, which means they let in more light and can be shot on darker lit sets. This is particularly true for the long focal lengths they were shooting at, such as 300mm. He selected Fuji non-premier Cabrio zooms like the 25-300, which has a stop of T3.85 at the long end of the zoom. Since they were shooting on film, which has a slower EI than the native EI of most digital cameras, they needed faster lenses to be able to shoot in low light scenarios. Sandgren also rented an Aten Penelope, which he always had on standby with a 40mm spherical macro Kawa lens. He used this setup for moments where the characters felt really nervous or tense, by pushing in inches from their eyes to visually communicate a feeling of internal existential terror that the characters were going through in that moment. While he has used the digital Alexa on some of his commercial work, he likes using 35mm film on features when presented with the option. Some other 35mm film cameras that he's used include the Arriflex 235, the 435, the Arricam Lite, and the Panaflex XL2 from Panavision. These have been paired with lenses like Hawk V-Lite 1.3x anamorphics, Canon K35s, Atlas Orion anamorphics, the Camtech modded vintage version of the Zeiss Ultra Primes, and anamorphic glass from Panavision such as the C, E, and G series. He alternates between anamorphic and spherical lenses for both aesthetic as well as practical reasons. He has used a variety of film stocks, including Fujifilm Eterna Vivid stocks before they were discontinued, but now selects from the Kodak motion picture stocks which are still available for use. He doesn't stick to a single stock and often chooses a range of stocks for different scenarios that include fine-grained daylight stocks for bright exteriors, like 50D, more sensitive daylight stocks like 250D, and high-sensitivity tungsten stocks like 500T for interiors and night scenes. His preference for film is also due to the different gauges or formats that it comes in. He can select different formats to communicate different tones or differentiate time periods or locations in a movie. For example, on First Man he used lower gauge, higher grain 16mm film for scenes inside the spacecraft to create a more realistic, documentary-like 60s and 70s feel that was more raw and authentic. He then switched to 35mm, with a more normal grain and increased contrast when the story moved to the NASA industrial world and for scenes inside his home. To create an extreme contrast between the spaceship interiors and the more surrealistic moments of actually being on the moon, he turned to the super crisp, large format 70mm IMAX. Constructing a realistic feeling sun required coming up with a strong, single light source. He got Attitude Specialty Lighting, who make 100K soft suns, to construct two custom, high-output 200K soft suns to provide a large area source that mimicked hard sunlight. He often uses strong, single-directional sources of light, such as HMIs or tungsten units that he'll gel to get to a daylight color temperature. He then fills in little pockets of light and creates color contrast in interiors by using practical sources built in or placed on the set that you can see in the shot. But his approach to lighting and the gear involved changes depending on each story. This could mean using a wall of LED screens with projected NASA archival footage to create in-camera space backgrounds with more realistic light and reflections. Or he may go in the opposite direction of realism, into the world where lighting is determined by emotion and classical Hollywood tropes. This was done in La La Land by setting up an overhead blanket light at 4000 Kelvin, hitting the walls with colorful practical fixtures, and then rigging a tungsten spotlight to a dimmer which he could bring up or dim down to isolate characters in a nostalgic moment of focus. These evoke different tones. One is concerned with realism, and the other plays into visualizing abstract emotion. These examples go to show that Sandgren's style cannot be limited to a singular look, technique, or gear preference. Each project requires a different feeling, and each director he works with has different sensibilities and interpretations of the script. It's his job to find a collaborative balance where the tone and themes in each scene are established, and then use that as a jumping off point to create visuals which represent a feeling. Thanks for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, please give the video a thumbs up and subscribe, or if you're so inclined, you can also support the channel by getting some of my original merch, or by signing up to Patreon where I post weekly videos free of ads. Otherwise, until next time, thanks for watching and goodbye.